Welcome, everybody. Today, Dr. Kelly Victor and I will be welcoming Lieutenant Colonel Theresa Long, whom testified at the Military Whistle Protection Act, or under that act, that she had witnessed symptoms of myocarditis in pilots who had received the mRNA vaccine, and she was concerned they would die in flight. However, she was informed by her superiors that those concerns perhaps were not going to be pursued. And one morning, she says, I had to ground 3 out of 3 pilots due to vaccine injuries. So we're going to talk about that and her sworn testimony. I'll tell you more about her pedigree and background. And of course, we are out there on Twitter Spaces. I'm watching you all on the Restream. And of course, at the Rumble Rants, I'll be watching you there as well. And after I speak with Lieutenant Colonel Long, of course, Dr. Kelly Victor will step in and we'll hear from her as well. So let's get right to it. Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. And welcome to our Wednesday show. They're always very interesting. Caleb, can we put up the upcoming guest as well? I know we have Steve Kirsch coming in here tomorrow. We also have Asim Malhotra next week, Megan Kelly on January 3rd, Byron Brindle the 4th, and February 1st, Dr. Ryan Cole comes back. He very kindly was on the Twitter Spaces yesterday. It was kind of interesting to get a little update from him. I had a chance to ask him about whether or not there was immunohistochemical changes that we could document to tell us whether or not the proteins embedded in the endothelium that he was seeing in these patients who died of essentially endotheliitis myocarditis, whether that also included the fragments of spike protein, the malfolding spike proteins, which have sort of also, it's another category that has been sort of unattended to. I have lots of questions about. But I want to get to our guest right away. Let me tell you a little bit about her. As Lieutenant Colonel Theresa Long, MD, MPH. She has served as Army since 1991. She has a bachelor's in neuroscience from UT, a MD from UT as well, however, in Houston. She completed a residency in Aerospace and Occupational Medicine at the U.S. Army School of Aviation, master's in public health from University of West Florida. She received her especially military training in the medical management of biological and chemical casualties, as well as medical effects of ionizing radiation. She's also trained as an aviation safety officer and as well as an Army flight surgeon, amongst other things. Please welcome Dr. Theresa Long.
Hi, Dr. Drew. Thank you for having me on your show.
It is a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, you had a comment you wanted to make.
Yes. My opinions are my own. They do not reflect that of the United States Army, the DoD, or any entity thereof.
Has anything changed in terms of a willingness to kind of... So let me just frame it this way. We know that we rushed these vaccines out. It was an emergency circumstance. It was an extraordinary time. Things were rolled out quickly. The usual process of use authorization, as well as just the usual practice of bioscience and how things are sort of assessed, all that was skipped in the name of getting this thing out as fast as possible. Why suddenly, when people see signals here and there, and ask questions, I wonder if there's something going on here. Why don't we go back and do the usual research proceedings that we would customarily do to look at whether any of these signals have validity? Why is that a sin now?
I'm not sure. That's a great question. And why we've deviated from all of our safety procedures and processes in place, why we've completely abandoned risk management and all the principles of epidemiology. It's really quite something to see. And anyone with a background in epidemiology would want the data on the emerging adverse events that are going on after this new novel technology platform for what they they are calling a vaccine, was introduced not only in our military, but across the country and around the globe. And there doesn't seem to even be a healthy amount of scientific curiosity about the adverse events that we're seeing and the signals, safety signals that are glaring in every aspect.
What are your most concerning signals?
My most concerning is that I have a fixed population of 4,000 people that are extremely healthy and fit. They're selected for their health and fitness to be pilots, and I monitor the health of that population. And to have seen the health of that population decline, and to see upticks in things that, in 30 years in the Army and 16 years as a practicing physician in the military, I had never seen such a clustering of very unusual things in such healthy young adults, and especially young males. And so in the military, there are doctors that just happen to put on a uniform, and there are officers, there are Army doctors. And so when you're trained to think about anything that could pose a threat to the health of our fighting force, even if it was rolled out and all the regular safety systems had been in place, and we had taken the time to get this right, you still should be monitoring. There's a reason that vaccine vials have lot numbers, and people should be looking at lot numbers. Perhaps there's a correlation between increased amount of adverse events in a certain lot number. But to have no discussion whatsoever, and for people to completely and blindly believe that this thing is as safe as air and water, when they have no historical data to back that up.
How do we tease out this? This is something I've been asking for lately, and I'm shocked that it's not sort of priority one. How do we tease out what's COVID, what's vaccine and COVID? Because any one of those could be the main culprit, or it could be distributed across. Who knows? It could be any possibility, because they seem to have done nothing to answer that basic question. Well, they'll point at things and go, see, it's all COVID. Unvaccinated people have less this, less that. Really poor observational sort of correlational studies. They need to do the real studies to decide what's COVID plus vax, what's vax, what's booster. Maybe there's a corollary. Maybe it's just the boosting. But don't you agree with me that we got to answer that question, priority one?
Yes, absolutely. And before the majority of the force was vaccinated, one of the things I was kind of screaming from the rooftops was that we needed to check for antibodies, and we needed to see if people had already been exposed to COVID. And I knew that if we did not get those lab results on people before we vaccinated them, that this is exactly where we would be, where people would always, the pharmaceutical companies and the people that push this would always have the excuse, well, this was COVID. And I encouraged everyone I could, if I can't dissuade you from getting this, I encouraged people to at least go, even if it cost money out of their own pocket, and get tested and see if they had antibodies to COVID, so that if they got sick later on and people tried to say, no, it was just COVID, you could say, nope, this is the day before I got my vaccine and it was negative. But
and it could,
to my surprise,
and it could still be, yeah. I could be some variation of that, but you're surprised. I'm sorry.
To my surprise, I was ordered not to order antibody tests on anyone. That we were not supposed to do that. Which
it's so weird.
Really bizarre.
Yeah. Let me circle back around and talk to you as a public health official, as somebody with training in public health, at least. What's going on? What happened to our public health officials? What is? I'm so confused, and I've been confused for 2 years. and confused about different things every step along the way. One of the first thing that confused me was the mandating, and the lack of risk reward, and the certitude, and the use of fear. Those things were just astonishing to me. What do you think's going on here now?
Well, I don't mass psychosis. I will tell you that I have seen is even in providers, you had all these providers that jumped on this bandwagon, and they had all their virtue signaling, and they felt really great because they were doing their part, and they did not put in the time to sit down and read, not what the CDC was telling them or what Anthony Fauci was telling them, but actually sit down and read the scientific literature and look at the studies, and do their own research. They didn't. So now they're in the position where they have promoted this as safe and effective, and they've staked their reputations on that, and they don't know how to admit that they recommended to their friends and their family and their patients something that is not safe and effective, and they're going to be serious consequences.
It wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be the first time a medicine came out or treatment came out, and after widespread use, we found out there were some problems with it. I've been through many cycles of all kinds of medication that have been in that category.
Yeah.
Why suddenly this one we behave totally differently? It's so weird. And by the way, I certainly wouldn't ask those same people to come off their position completely. I still, although Dr. Victory disagrees with me, I still think that in the elderly population, I think I know what I'm doing when I'm vaccinating and boosting. I'm not as worried with the younger females, but there are some concerns there. I'm just worried about this one population with the younger males, where there's a very heavy signal that everybody's seeing, but everyone's ignoring. And why to say, now after we've spread it out, we've used it widely, we're starting to see a signal. We have to refine our risk reward, or at least be able to do better informed consent even. Why is that? Why is just getting to that place so impossible?
I think we have seen this momentum in a direction that was not science-based, and it's really quite astonishing to me that any dissension from this was stamped out immediately, and there was a swift and brutal response to anyone who tried to speak up and just say, hey, there's a long litany of history of the pharmaceutical companies being sued, having to take drugs off the market. And somehow this has become a sin to even, mention that there might be a problem here. And I don't know how we step back from this, but it's just like I teach my kids, think very carefully before you do something that is a one-way direct. You can't take it back, and it's going to have second and third order consequences. But I think to motivate people from medical treatment out of fear was a huge driver in the wrong direction, because fear is a very powerful motivator. But I would tell you, on the battlefield, if we had bad intelligence and we were working off bad intelligence and soldiers were getting slaughtered, and we realized we had bad intelligence, we would not, for ego's sake, say, let's keep going with this game plan. Let's keep moving forward. We would find good intelligence, and we would have to pivot from where we were at if we wanted to win that battle. And that's something I'm seeing people will not do, is when they realize there's a mistake that has been made here, and not even go into the backstory of why we're at where we're at. But this is where we're at, and clearly the safety signals are there, and we need to pivot, and people don't want to.
people, I'm not sure who the people are necessarily. I don't know if you can necessarily comment on that, but it is, well, the fact that fear was systematically used to me already is an ethical problem. That is, I've never, ever, I mean, I guess we did a little bit of that back in the AIDS epidemic, but it was done actually it didn't work, and we finally realized that the way to do it was to use humor and music and relatable stories of people with these conditions, and tell narratives, and all it was actually a discipline that developed of how to change health behaviors, particularly in young people. And it was shown very clearly that authoritarianism and fear, no, did not really work. Now we're trying to get the entire population on board quickly in the case of this pandemic, and I understand why they might have used some fear, but they should have at least been contemplating the risk reward of that and the ethics of that. And it seems to have not been something that was contemplated and is currently not contemplated, which is, again, I worry that public health officials are being trained in ways that are problematic because it was so,
Yeah.
it wasn't ubiquitous, but it was so commonplace amongst even the local and county level mental health professionals, so called.
Well, when you train in public health, they train you about messaging in a disaster situation. That there has to be one unified message that is repeated and regurgitated ad nauseum, uh, an unfortunate long message. And so,
Is it
yes, it is.
possible? Is it possible that that technique is from a day of a completely different media landscape of sort of broadcast radio and television, rather than the current IP to IP kind of communication that goes on, in which there is ample opportunity to explain your position and
Yes.
not just put it as a shibboleth out there. Be afraid, shelter in place. That is the most disgusting. Unless there was an incoming nuclear, missile. It's the most disgusting thing I ever saw. Do you agree with me?
I do, and a lot of people, when it comes to aerospace medicine, um, a lot of people ask me, like, "What do you do?" Our entire focus is on the health of pilots, and I always tell people there's two populations of people that just can't take everything and anything that's over the counter: pregnant women and pilots. Right? You pilot
Mhm,
can't
mhm.
take a Benadryl and just go fly. That
Yeah.
that could cause a major air disaster. So I think the most alarming thing for me was to see this complete deviation from all of our risk management principles and aerospace medicine decision making. And so when I will never forget when Peter McCullough called me one day and he said, Colonel Long, the CDC is about to have an emergency meeting about the increased incidence of myocarditis in young, healthy males. And he said, "This is your population. Oh my gosh, you have to hit the brakes. You can't do this." And the risk of sudden cardiac death. Now, so to a flight surgeon or anybody in aerospace medicine, the thing that actually just is terrifying to us is something sudden incapacitation that is
Mhm.
unpredictable is the thing that we are hyper vigilant about because you're talking about having x number of souls in the back of the aircraft that are dependent on that pilot. And so, that was the thing that really caught my attention, was that we were putting our young, healthy males at this increased risk of myocarditis, which put them at an increased risk of sudden cardiac death. And when you look at the literature and you see that most people with myocarditis don't have any symptoms, and that like potentially the only way to truly know whether or not they had myocarditis is a very, very expensive cardiac MRI or a cardiac biopsy. And you realize quickly this is a nightmare. We don't want to go down this path of having to get these super expensive cardiac MRIs on every single pilot to ensure that they're safe to fly after every 6 months after every vaccination. But there was no relenting. And I will tell you, I talked to a very senior cardiologist for the FAA very early on. And he completely agreed with my entire assessment that we had to stop vaccinating pilots, that this was a disaster. And the FAA has pushed forward with that.
I would add, and document more clearly the cardiopulmonary effects of COVID in the intermediate to long term. Both those questions for pilots need to be answered, right? Because we're now into the endemic, and people seem to have lost track of what endemic means, which means we all get it, and we all get it more than once. That's the way it is. And so I still hear people say, "I can't believe I got it." Yeah, okay, you're going to get it. But Dr. Long, we're going to take a little break here. I want to bring Dr. Kelly Victory in as soon as possible. I appreciate your forthcoming with this. It's a very interesting conversation. More to be revealed. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with Lieutenant Colonel Theresa Long. Want to give the gift that keeps on giving? Genucell Skincare keeps everyone on your holiday list looking young and refreshed. And who doesn't need that type of luxury, especially over the holiday season? Genucell has so many products that Susan and I love. Genucell's XV Moisturizer locks in moisturizer on top of the serums, making dry spots a thing of the past, especially great with the colder climate and all the dryness of our skin, right? And with Genucell's Immediate Effect 2 eye cream, you can see the results in as little as 12 hours, guaranteed, or your money back. Susan loves Genucell's DFS Vitamin C Serum, the new deep firming serum, as well as the hyaluronic with C and lactic acid, which hydrates your skin and makes fine lines a thing of the past, while hopefully preventing future wrinkles from forming.
I am a snob when it comes to using products on my face. The dermatologist makes a ton of money from me. But when I was introduced to Genucell, I was so happy because it's so affordable and it works great. I was introduced to the Ultra Retinol Cream, which I love at night. All the eye creams are amazing. People notice my skin all the time, and I'm so excited because it's actually working.
Take advantage of amazing holiday savings by going to Genucell.com, and you will get 60% off with a special holiday stocking stuffer when you subscribe to My Favorites package at Genucell.com/Drew, and all orders are upgraded to free shipping for the rest of the holiday season. We will get it there quickly. Use code Drew at checkout for an extra 10% off your entire order. That is Genucell.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/Drew. Economic turmoil has a lot of people wondering what our government will do next. Will it be more wasteful spending, higher taxes? How do you protect your hard-earned savings? The answer could be gold. Gold is the world's oldest, most proven form of currency. It's there when inflation soars and when other assets go sideways. And that's why Birch Gold is thrilled to introduce a new product that reimagines gold as currency, the Goldback. This month, you'll get a free Goldback for every $5,000 purchased when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a precious metals IRA with Birch Gold by December 22nd, Susan's birthday, incidentally. Birch Gold will help you own gold and silver in a tax-sheltered account. Visit birchgold.com/Drew to claim your free info kit on gold, and then talk to one of their precious metals specialists. Reminder, I do not give financial advice. This is not financial advice, but you can go to Birch Gold, and with every purchase you make before December 22nd, you'll get a free Goldback. This is a stocking stuffer just in time for Christmas. Once again, visit birchgold.com/Drew. Protect your savings with gold today. Some platforms have banned the discussion of controversial topics. If this episode ends here, the rest of the show is available at drdrew.tv.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
Welcome, Dr. Kelly Victory. I know you're ready to get at this.
I am.
Maybe we should tell the story of your relationship with Lieutenant Colonel Long.
That's what I was going to start with. Dr. Long, thanks so much for being here, particularly right before the holidays. I know you've got to be super busy. You came on my radar about a year ago, really just about a year ago now, based on the testimony in front of Congress. And I'm going to get into the weeds with you on actually some of these adverse events and the actual data, but I wanted to frame it up for people how that happened. But one of the thing that got me permanently banned from Twitter was actually posting a link to your sworn testimony in front of Senator Ron Johnson's committee called A Second Opinion. And when I posted the link to that testimony, I set off a firestorm of just vitriolic, hateful commentary, people gunning for me. And within 36 hours, I think I was permanently banned from Twitter and remain in Twitter jail. I find it amusing that of all things they would call misinformation, a link to sworn congressional testimony is what is misinformation in the mind of some Twitter fact checker. Anyway, before I get into the weeds with you on the data, I want to frame it for people a little bit, what it was that you were reporting. I was on every news network that would have me when your testimony became live reporting on this. You and two of your other career military physician colleagues, brave people that you are, believed that you were seeing increases in certain categories of medical conditions, blood clots, fertility issues, neurologic issues, myocarditis, those sorts of things. Rather than running around like a bunch of bandy roosters screaming, this is what we're seeing, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you took the time to reference DMED, the Defense Military Epidemiology Database, something that you have access to that Dr. Drew and I do not, because you're in the military. You were able to look back historically over a 5-year period and calculate the average incidence on an annual basis of these different categories of things, heart attacks, strokes, miscarriages, fertility issues, Bell's palsy, whatever it was, and you compared it to the incidence that you were seeing in calendar year 2020. And in fact, it was only 11 months of it, as I recall, because you only did it through November at the time you said, holy bejesus, this is what we're seeing. And the numbers that I put in that tweet that you testified to were things like a 470% increase in blood clots to the lung, a 300% increase in miscarriages, a 270% increase in heart attacks, and on and on. So it was truly something that I think you did that was stunningly not only brave, but insightful to not just say, we think we're seeing this, but to say, here are the numbers. We know what we're seeing is real. So that's where you came onto my radar a year ago. Nice to finally get some time to talk with you one-on-one. Talk about that data, that process of what you and your colleagues did, what the process was, how you came to the decision to look into it and take it from there.
Sure. Well, I started to see unusual things in a very young, healthy population, and having epidemiology and public health background, it quickly caught my attention. And you can call around to other colleagues and say, hey, what are you seeing? And it's a lot of anecdotal, yes, we're seeing unusual things. But very fortunately for me, when I was getting my master's in public health through the military, I was given access to the Defense Epidemiology Database for my research project. And it was a year-long research. And so I used the database very extensively. I was trained on how to use it. And so basically in the database, all across the entire Department of Defense, we use one electronic medical record system. So it doesn't matter if you're in Afghanistan or Texas, all those records are accessible. And so what the DMED does is it takes ICD codes, or international of disease, that are specific to a disease, injury, or illness, and you can query this database, and it's really a pretty amazing database. You could narrow it down and see how many pilots on Fort Rucker had pulmonary embolisms, during a certain period of time or whatever. You could look all the way across the DoD. You could look at just females, just Hispanics. I mean, it's really pretty amazing. But when I was told that they were not tracking, tracing, or monitoring adverse events, I became very concerned that what I was seeing locally was not just local. And one day I was sitting there and kind of thought, well, I wonder if I still have access to the DMED. It's been several years since I completed my research. And I did. And I sat down and I started putting in everything I was seeing. And the numbers were coming back just horrific. And we rolled out the vac in the military in January of 2021. And so 10 months into 2021, the numbers were off the charts. And I called up Colonel Chambers and asked him, like, hey, tell me some things you're seeing. And I started pulling those codes and asked him to take a look at the DMED. Asked Major Sam Sigaloff and Lieutenant Mark Bashaw to look in the database. And we couldn't believe what we were seeing. And all of what we were putting in were consistent with the things that we were seeing. And we kind of racked our brains. It was very nerving because the data was so catastrophic. My attorney was very fearful for my life, and how we would get that data into someone who could do something about it or look into it. And so we ended up bringing that data to Senator Johnson, Ron Johnson, and within a few hours, Moderna lost $140 billion in stock. So it's pretty concerning.
Yeah. Well, and again, just to put this in perspective for people who are listening, when you reported, for example, a 300% increase in cancers, it was based on compared to the annual average, a 300% increase in calendar year 2021. It wasn't an increase from one case on average to three. It was an increase from 38,000 cases on average to 140,000 cases. Okay, so these were orders of magnitude. These were not small numbers. Statistics, as people know, can be very deceptive. If you say 300% increase and you mean from one case a year to three, it doesn't mean much. But you were talking in the tens of thousands of cases. And I assume that was the case for the other categories of illnesses or conditions as well.
Yes, and things like, for example, pulmonary embolisms. What the general public may not understand is the prevalence, meaning how much disease, how many pulmonary embolisms a population has over a period of time, is very consistent. Mm-hmm. And so I could actually take, when people started saying the data was fabricated or made up, before we ever released it, we looked and we crunched the numbers and we said, okay, what is the prevalence of pulmonary embolisms in this age group? And we calculated out what we should be seeing in the military population, and that was consistent with the 2016 to 2020 numbers. And then you look at 2021, and it wouldn't make sense. So in retrospect, people said, well, the 2021 data was accurate, but there was a supposedly for 5 years in our surveillance system that was underreported. So they went back and they elevated all the previous year's numbers. But for something like that, you would say, so you mean to tell me that in the military, we've always had pulmonary embolisms, like, 10 times the national average, and the national average including people all the way up 90 years old. So are we to believe that our military has always been sicker than the general population, and we just didn't realize it? And that's
Well, I want to push back a little bit right there, Dr. Long, if you don't mind, just a little bit of pressure right there, which is I would expect you to have at least more DVT with the prolonged, position in a cockpit or a flight deck for long periods of time. I would imagine that pilots would have a higher incidence, even though they're younger, certainly higher than their cohort of the same age from the prolonged sitting and whatnot and lack of mobility. But the other thing is, and just going to share my own observation, I have not seen a lot of DVT from vaccine, but I saw a lot of DVT from COVID, a lot, when they were acutely ill, not subsequently.
Well, I would tell you that actually the database can go all the way back to 1990. And so the database was not just looking at pilots, it was looking at everyone from across the board. So, no, we're a younger, healthier population with less comorbidities than the general public. So it wasn't just one ICD code, it was numerous ICD codes. And the other thing we did is we looked at ICD codes that we had no pathophysiologic basis to believe would increase with COVID or the vaccine. And I won't tell you what we ran numerous of them, and they were steady, really steady, no increase. And so, I mean, we did a lot of queries and a lot of consulting specialists.
Yeah. So, and I was really very, very impressed with what you did with this. So you come up with this data now, and it wasn't just one or two categories of things. It was many. And as you said, you compared it to other things that you wouldn't expect to have an increase in incidence of appendicitis or whatever else. And lo and behold, those were very stable, as you'd predict. So you take this information to Senator Ron Johnson, who, by the way, as an aside, is one of the only people in Washington doing anything about anything. God bless him for his efforts. You bring this to him. What was the response of the military? Talk about that process. I can't imagine, so you've got this trove of data that you're about to blow it wide open. Talk about what was their response?
Nothing.
So they didn't say, we want to look at it with you, we want to understand it. These are our pilots that are, in charge of some pretty important things. Nobody wanted to discuss it with you.
Not a single person reached out.
To this day, have they?
No. And I did go on to pretty much demand to meet with a senior leader and laid it out for him. And I just saw the blood drain out of his face as I brought the numbers and laid out for him meticulously a lot more data than the general public has seen, and reasons why the data was credible. As this person told me, if what you're saying is true, and if this data is true, I'm going to make it right. And I'm like, you can't make this right. It's been injected into all of these people. It can't be undone, but we can start screening. We can start setting a screening process in place to make sure that we identify any potentially deadly things like myocarditis early. And but I think what is the bigger story is the complete absence of dialogue about this. And many people would tell you, myself, Pete, Sam, we literally prayed we were wrong on this because it was probably the most painful couple, for me to realize what I was seeing in my local population was part of a much bigger picture, and being in the position of how do I protect soldiers, and how do we get this information to people who will do something about it.
Well, I certainly share that sentiment. I get no joy out of being right about this because the implications are horrific. And one of the reasons that this platform, for me, came into my being on this platform with Drew came into being was because of the egregious censorship that has happened, the total lack of dialogue. That before COVID, robust, vigorous debate was a cornerstone of medicine and something that we really took pride in, and it has been absolutely non-existent, as you know. You and I were speaking a couple weeks ago. We were talking about some blood work that you do routinely on soldiers, and your ability to determine whether or not somebody perhaps may not be vaccinated on the basis of routine blood work that you're running. Talk a little bit about that.
I've been pretty surprised to see suppression in the white blood cell count, neutrophils, and lymphocytes, and not just in one or two people, but numerous people. And it and I've had the occasion where it indicates that somebody may be vaccinated, but that's completely normal. And let's just say reason to believe they're not maybe vaccinated. But I have never to see that consistently across the board in numerous young people, and not just one abnormal lab, but repeated labs are abnormal, is concerning. I've probably in my career looked at tens of thousands of CBCs, and I have not seen this many abnormal CBCs in my whole 15 years prior to this year. So
I still have that
again,
same lingering question, though, guys. The lingering question is COVID plus vaccine, vaccine plus COVID, just vaccine. Can you tease any of that out for us?
I honestly never saw any of that with this consistency before the vaccine was rolled out. But interestingly enough, at the most recent discussion with Senator Johnson, Dr. Ryan Cole talked about how in the tissue samples, what he sees is a ton of neutrophils and lymphocytes within the tissue. Yeah. And made me start realizing maybe all of those are getting sequestered into there. But Dr. Drew, you bring up a very important point, that correlation does not mean causation.
Right.
But we are not talking about this. We're not looking at this. And right out the beginning,
that's my concern.
My concern was that they had the studies that showed, they said, we're vaccinating all of these people because the risk of getting myocarditis from COVID infection is what we're preventing with this vaccine. And I said, well, okay, the risk of myocarditis is 2.3%. But and then when we had the CDC come in and say there was a increased risk with vaccine, my big concern is it synergistic? What is the effect?
Right.
Because now when I've seen 98% of the people COVID positive in the last year are fully vaccinated, and they've gotten 2 bouts of COVID. Now we're talking about people with 3 and 4 risk factors for myocarditis. And I don't know, does that put them at a 30% increased risk, a 20%? Right. I don't know, but we like to, there's no way for me to do risk mitigation when I'm completely blind. And so since we don't have the data to completely ignore that that it is a concern and it is a risk, and just not talk about it is not acceptable. So
Take us to. I'm sorry, I was going to say, take us to the perspective of the soldier. You know, you're a career military physician. Are you personally? How does it work in the Army? Do soldiers come to you to get a required vaccine, or is there like a vaccine clinic, and they just go there and get that done? And so or are you personally responsible for giving these mandated vaccines? And either way, what is your conversation with the average soldier? Are they gung-ho, yeah, feeling awesome that they got to get their fifth booster, or are they not keen on this but are doing it to keep a job? Talk a little bit about that whole thing.
Sure. So we have vaccine clinics. So generally, we keep track that we have a dashboard that shows us if they're deficient in getting their HIV annual test drawn, or their immunizations up to date, and those types of things. So we're aware if someone's deficient in a immunization, but we are generally not the people who do the immunization. Now, when the vaccine mandate came down, historically, we have a list of reasons why someone could be exempted from the vaccine, to include a infection demonstrated by antibodies. And for this vaccine, for COVID, all of a sudden, natural immunity didn't count. And all of a sudden, people who had an allergy to polyethylene glycol, that didn't count. And so all of a sudden we're deviating again from long-standing procedures and policies with no explanation why. And I was forbidden from having any say on whether or not people I was responsible for got a medical exemption. And when you all of these deviations that don't make sense, really start to raise a lot of flags about why all of a sudden natural immunity is not a reason to not vaccinate somebody, and why aren't we checking antibodies on people? So
one of the things it occurred to me before this conversation was that all three of us, you, Dr. Drew, and I, all took a Hippocratic oath. We share that in common. We not only all went to medical school and did residencies, but we all took the same oath. I have, on top of that, I have a very strong faith. I don't, it's something that I haven't discussed with Drew, but I have a very strong faith that keeps me grounded in my medical practice. But you answer to a third very powerful authority, namely, the commander-in-chief. You answer to a third component that I do not. How have you balanced that, your medical oath and ethics and training, along with your commitment, your oath to the government and to the military?
Well, that's easy. For me, I obey God and I leave the consequences to Him. My morals, my ethics are not, they're not for sale. And I won't compromise them. And before I ever came out publicly, I had brought my concerns high up in the Defense Health Agency, and on the spot was given a medical exemption. And once I came forward as a whistleblower, I lost that exemption. And but I had told my family, look, I have to do this. It may cost me my medical license, pension, any in the military, and my wings, but I have to do this, and I'm willing to lay all of that down, because you cannot compromise here. I will not compromise the health and safety of service members for any narrative or agenda, or it's absolutely the hill I'll die on. And I think I don't really understand why other people are indifferent to what is going on, and why other people would compromise that.
So they took away your medical exemption. They removed your medical exemption when you released this data. Oh.
It was supposed to be for a time, and then I was told that duration was no longer going to be respected, and that's nothing I didn't. I didn't think that it was appropriate for me to get an exemption when other people with the same concerns wouldn't get an exemption. So I've filed for a religious accommodation request. I've already gotten the first denial back, and we weren't talking about a handful of soldiers. We were talking about upwards of 250,000 soldiers who were facing being kicked out of the military. And a lot of people don't realize that right out the bat, anyone who was in a command position was told that if they did not get vaccinated, or they would not order their soldiers to get vaccinated, they were immediately relieved of their command. So right out the bat, you got rid of any critical thinkers. You got rid of anyone who had concerns about this vaccine.
That to me is one of the scariest parts of it, is that when you cull the herd of anybody who actually is capable of having critical thinking or dares to ask a question. I'm sorry, Drew, I cut you off twice.
We have I just noticed there are a lot of hands up in the Twitter Spaces, and there was another physician on hand here. Can we take a question?
Sure.
You guys up for that? Or comment? Yeah. We'll see what she wants to say. Mary, I want to give you a chance to speak. You have to unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner. There you are. What do you have in mind? I don't know why we're not hearing her. Sometimes a little delay on some of this. Mary, maybe Caleb, can you help us with this?
I'm looking at, I don't see any sound coming from her yet, so she might not have unmuted herself.
She looks unmuted, but I think the mic may not be working or some such thing. Well, there we go. There was my big plan to get some questioning going in here.
I think this issue, though, what you're bringing up, Dr. Long, is really critical. The idea that we are culling the herd of anybody who would ask questions is happening not just in the military; it's happening in healthcare as well. When you start removing everybody from the hospital staff and relieving people of their admitting privileges if they dare to ask questions, all you're left with is a bunch of robots. I'm sorry, that sounds like Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Dr. Drew. Nice to talk to you.
You as well.
I'm a doctor in Dallas, and I'm just listening to Colonel Long's story, and it's just unbelievable that that she's having to go through this. But I wanted to tell you that every doctor who represented this as safe and effective without doing research needs to go back and do a lot of research and look at the population that clearly the risks outweigh the benefits in many of the population. And for her to sacrifice her career in honor of her oath, her Hippocratic oath, and to step forward and do what she's done in order to support her patients and do no harm, I think is just what we all should be doing. And I commend her for that. And
Mary, let me interrupt you. I would even say there's a simpler middle ground for physicians who are uncertain about those risk populations and these signals is to just go and say, hey, it's hard for me to give you fully informed consent because we haven't really finished the evaluation yet. The data is suggesting things. It's really about the consent process in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Now, you could also choose not to give them to certain populations where you're seeing a signal, but at the very minimum, raise the issue with the patient. Like, there are doctors that are concerned. There's research that needs to be done. As we make this decision together, let's talk about these things. And then I even will say things like, look, I hear a lot about these problems, and so I might be a little biased by it. If you really are hell-bent on getting the vaccine, I will support you in that, but I want to make sure you're fully informed before you do it.
Exactly. And that's how I handled it in my practice. Yes.
Lieutenant Colonel?
And Dr. Drew, I would say that was one of the starting points. Was really Dr. McCullough called me and I read the information. Hey, thank God we have this renowned cardiologist calling us with information that could impact us. I immediately asked, at the very minimum, I was mortified to go in to work the next day, see the immunization clinic up and running without pause. And I asked in a series of emails, could we at least hear that everyone was getting informed consent about this risk of myocarditis, that there was a pending meeting, that there's forthcoming information. And I was reported for that. And got me into a lot of trouble for even asking if they could have informed consent. And I came from a place where when you only have, across the entire DoD, only 93 soldiers' deaths attributed to COVID, we have meticulous record keeping system. So I was saying, unlike the general public, we could literally 25-year-old down and say, across the DoD, we had 0 25-year-olds that are African American, everything about your demographics that died from COVID, versus this vaccine, in which we have these emerging trends from VAERS. And now we have concern for this age group with this CDC meeting. The idea of informed consent was no. And soldiers, and despite what people think, we do not forfeit all of our rights when we go into service. We are not slaves. We are not big farms lab rats. We're not. We are the sons and daughters of this country that people have loaned, and for serving our country, not for serving any kind of interest in the pharmaceutical company. So,
and Mary, as the fourth position in this little group, I just want to say, isn't it so odd to you as it is to the three of us? I'm guessing you feel the same way.
Yes, absolutely. My complaint has never been about the speed or even the technology. I understand why we rushed it. What my problem always was informed consent, and even my ability to find research was so hampered by the censoring that I couldn't even give informed consent, not for lack of trying. I literally dedicated hundreds of hours to trying to answer this question. I knew that I would have to ask every single patient. We would have to have this discussion about what the benefits and risks would be. And the science was so incredibly censored and so difficult to come by. And,
I would even push back. I would push
that there were certainly.
I would push back. I would push back even on the quote need to rush it. There's a need to rush it only if you continue to suppress the fact that there are readily available, safe, and very effective treatments. It was only because they continued to promote the idea that there's no treatment for COVID. They continued to censor anybody who talked about using fluvoxamine or inhaled steroids, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, all of the huge cocktail of medications that we knew really from the very beginning, within a matter of weeks, we knew that those things were effective. Peter McCullough had already put together a protocol within a matter less than 2 months in the start of the pandemic, we had a protocol for treating it. So the illusion of the necessity for rapidly pushing this vaccine was really based on continuing with the therapeutic nihilism and denying the existence of safe, readily available medications.
Well, Kelly,
and
I
how I
think
just to go ahead.
the point
Colonel.
I think is important to make. Informed consent is even more important in the military setting because only the President of the United States can waive informed consent of service members. And so you cannot force a service member to take an EUA product without a waiver from the President of the United States. That waiver has never been issued. So now you're talking about a population of people who can be ordered to do something with the threat of everything from negative action to imprisonment for disobeying an order. So informed consent was paramount. And you cannot just say, they're in the service, they don't have any rights. Just stand in line, shut up, take your shot. And who ultimately pays when these service members are injured is the American taxpayer is going to be paying their disability, not the pharmaceutical companies, but the American taxpayer who's paying the medical bills when they are injured and they have to receive a lot of medical care. It's the American taxpayers. And again, the pharmaceutical companies are getting off scot-free.
No, I agree with you. And I also have said we have enjoyed, Drew, for decades now. We have enjoyed not having a draft. We have not had any selective service for decades now. With the exodus of young, healthy military recruits and the hesitance of people to join the military because they don't want to be forced to take a vaccine that they either don't want or don't need because they've already gotten natural immunity. That's a real problem. I would not be surprised if this vaccine mandate for the military ultimately translates into a reinstitution of the draft, as we have simply not enough service members to run a military that's capable of defending this country.
Crazy. Super crazy. I want to circle back to the early treatment stuff, and you and I have sort of disagreed on that the whole way in our relationship. But I always want to keep people updated on my thinking, because what I've always said was, I saw people using all those things at the early part of the pandemic, and I'm not sure they did anything. People got really sick, still got really sick, and the Paxlovid really interrupts that. But I have to tell you now, I have seen so much rebound from Paxlovid. I'm getting very concerned about it. And the rebounds are nasty. And so under 65, I'm increasingly convinced that is the wrong drug. There's still molnupiravir if you want to try something like that. But my feelings of Paxlovid have shifted a little bit. And so I just wanted to update as I talk about these things.
Well, there's a reason I call it Paxlovid.
Yeah, I think that why we wouldn't entertain those things early on is simply mind-boggling.
It was weird.
And I remember going to a senior leader and saying, before the vaccine rolled out and everyone's terrified they're going to die, I said, why don't we try chloroquine and offer it to everyone? And we can gather enough data. We are a small population, but enough for a study. We could gather all that data, and by the time the vaccine rolls out a year or so, we'll know whether or not it works. It's not going to harm anybody, but we'll definitely know if it helped. And the answer is just no. And so
it was weird.
If you're
weird. The whole thing is so weird.
If you're in such an emergency that you have to go at the speed of science, why wouldn't you try everything in your toolbox? This doesn't make sense.
So
Kelly,
where
we
do
have
you
to kind of drift towards it's kind of start to move towards wrapping up here. So I'm going to leave it in your hands for a few minutes.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to ask Dr. Long, where do you go from here? You've been incredibly brave. You're a COVID truth warrior. I like to consider myself in that same that same boat. It hasn't been easy. I'm sure you have suffered the slings and arrows as well. Where do you go from here?
Well, I'm going to keep pushing forward, trying to take care of soldiers. I think repealing the vaccine mandate is not enough. A lot of damage has been caused to people's careers. Like you said, our recruiting is absolutely failing. We have a mass exodus of people leaving the service. We have people leaving because they're injured. And so the bigger question is, how do we recover from this? And whether I have a part in that recovery process in the military, I'm not sure. But I think people can see from Twitter and the Twitter files, this is big explosive stuff coming out on the Twitter files, and it's not being covered by any news media networks. Just like when the DMED data came out, it wasn't covered by anyone. And I think it is the most accurate epidemiology database in the United States, and all of the data and all of the information being completely ignored. It's very concerning.
Well, I did my part. I have a very big mouth, and I went on every news network that would have me, as I said, and exposed that data. And I will continue to do so. So I really appreciate you coming here, because I think it's unique data. You had the ability to access epidemiologic data that the rest of us don't have, just because of the unique nature of the way that the military captures these ICD-9 codes. And I thought it was fascinating and a brilliant way to look at it. So hopefully it won't ultimately get ignored. Hopefully they'll continue to delve into the weeds on it, because it's important information. And I thank you personally for being willing, not only brave enough to come here, but smart enough to do that data analysis.
Well, I think it has to be said that the data, what's more concerning, that potentially our surveillance system was glitching and defective for 5 years during the pandemic,
Right.
or that the data is accurate. Both of those are very concerning to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then back to Kelly's point, it's a uniform, healthy population, specifically the group we are most concerned about in the short term. I hope the something you said is ringing in my. I always walk away with a nugget of really important information, and two things. One, when you said that the public health axioms have been about repeating these shibboleths, these empty slogans with repetition. It's just nonsense, and it's just not pertinent to the present moment. The way the media system works today, it's just ridiculous. That I took away that. And the other thing that's ringing in my head is that there's a senior cardiologist who turned pale in front of you, whose ear you have. I hope you can twist his arm yet again to try to get a few weeks of data. Let's get some data going in here. Let's get some perspective, something, if it is all possible. But we do appreciate you coming in here very much. And I will tell you that throughout all these chat threads, we're looking at just universal praise for your courage at stepping up and doing what you believe to be right.
Well, thank you. It would be great if Musk would put this out on Twitter Space and take up this Twitter file that never got tweeted out, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at our Twitter Spaces here. I don't see him there, but maybe there's some other ones amongst the Twitter
500
Spaces.
people there.
There's a lot of people in Twitter Spaces right now, and but again, I'm looking for Mr. Musk, and I don't see him there.
Let me out of jail.
There are others.
Let me out of jail.
Maybe he's in there under a secret
Kelly
account.
needs to
probably.
come
Out
back.
of jail.
Well,
Dr.
well,
Drew
no,
and
because
Dr.
I know
Vickery,
when
I greatly appreciate your guys' relentless effort to bring the truth out and to just openly have a dialogue about it. I think that is the concerning thing, is the lack of dialogue and the lack of curiosity.
Yeah. It's
Agreed.
odd. It's weird. It's like it's hard to understand. As all three of us and Mary, the other physician that came up here, we all had the same kind of like the head shaking, which my head's been shaking for
Yeah.
2.5 years now. But thank you, Dr. Long. We'll let you go.
Thank you for your service.
If we can help you, and thank you for your service,
Thank
you let us
you.
know. Okay.
All right. Take care.
And
Okay.
then Kelly.
Bye.
Kelly, you and I are in here tomorrow with Steve
Yes.
Kirsch, which will be an
Yep.
interesting.
For my birthday.
It's Susan's birthday tomorrow as well.
My
so
favorite guest.
So and Steve,
he
Susan
had
loves
us
Steve.
on in YouTube jail a couple times, but
Yeah, every time we had Steve come on, we'd go on
But
YouTube jail.
I just wanted to mention how good Kelly's skin looks today.
Thank
I
you.
noticed it. I was like, "Whoa, did you?"
I'm
do
now a
something?" And I said,
Genucell.
Caleb, did
Yeah.
you?
I'm a
I said, "Did
Genucell
you
convert
send,
now.
Kelly some Genucell.
Yeah,
Susan
I
sent her
am. I'm a
big package.
Genucell. Yeah, yeah. I'm going back in time
Yeah, it's good
now.
stuff.
They're reversing the years. Yes, I'm a Genucell convert, and I've got my now beloved Dr. Drew bobblehead. Thank you for that.
I'm
That's
going to
my,
line them up.
I
side by
received it in the
side, see if
mail.
I can do
Exactly.
this.
There you go.
There they are, two of them
There you
side
go,
by
there
side.
you
See
go.
by her. There's hers. There's mine.
Merry Christmas.
Whoop, whoop.
There you go. Thank you. Thank
Oh.
you.
All right.
Yeah, so
Thanks
I'll be
for-
back
Thanks
with
for using
with
the product.
absolutely
Steve tomorrow.
No,
But
it's
also,
great stuff.
I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you've seen Asim Malhotra and the stuff he's been saying in Britain and in front of Parliament and whatnot. I had the chance to interview him on a podcast, and I've talked to him a couple times since then. That you know, as usual, I don't agree with everything he says, but oh man, he's got a very compelling case. When you hear him speak, he is. You heard him before?
Oh, I that's why I invited him on. I think he's spectacular. I think he
Yeah.
was a really, really staunch vaccine proponent, Drew, early on. And he
Yes.
has done a 180 largely because of what he's seeing. He's saying that the signals are clear. What we are seeing is unacceptable. This must stop. And so, no, he will be a great guest. And then, as you said, we've got Byron Bridle coming up, who just has got fascinating information. He's in Ontario. And then we'll have Dr. Ryan Cole, part 2, coming up in February.
Yep.
And then I'm sure we'll have some others in between. But yeah, really great guests coming up, and people, again, willing and brave enough to have the conversation. So hopefully people will make time for those shows.
I'm just shaking my head. It's truly odd that it requires any sort of bravery. It's just business. It should be business as usual, but here we are.
Well, that's what I said when I first posted that and referred to Dr. Theresa Long, Lieutenant Colonel Long, as a whistleblower. I said, how odd. In the past, we used to just call them honest physicians. You know, now she's
They're curious
a
or interested or
when you're releasing data that you see as a physician, no one called you a whistleblower in the past. You know, you used to be just a truth teller. But times have changed.
We didn't even have a category. It just was just what we did.
Here's the data.
Shared data, shared information.
Right.
I'm seeing something. Are you seeing something? I'm seeing something.
Yeah,
and that was
exactly.
it. Well, okay.
No.
So Steve is.
Well, you know what I just keep thinking is, if somebody designed this virus,
You're getting
this
paranoid.
is exactly what they would want to do: take down the Air Force.
Well,
you know, I mean, it
see,
and
Susan
to somehow
has a
get us
little
to do
paranoid
that.
streak. She's been listening to us for too long.
The communist plot always gets me. I'm sorry, I just can't help it.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
This is war, baby.
Yeah.
I want to save our people, not make it worse.
Well, we're looking for the truth, and it's truth.
Now, the vaccine was good at the beginning because a lot of people were dying that we couldn't, was running rampant. You're having a hard time with some of your elderly patients. So it was great for that.
I don't think anybody, although Steve Kirsch will say this tomorrow. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, let's put this out there. We're not saying the vaccine is bad. We're saying it needs to be
not given to 25-year-old healthy
groups,
human
maybe
beings.
not given. It needs to be reconsidered. You may go as far as saying it needs to be halted while we examine more, whatever. But we're not saying that. Are we saying that's not my opinion? You tell me yours.
Well, I am saying that the signals are so strong, are so overwhelming that we need to halt the vaccine immediately. I think there is absolutely no indication at this point for anyone to be getting it, given the strength of the adverse event signals, and given the fact that the new variants are so mild, and given that we have ready access to effective treatments. So I think it's a three-pronged thing. The vaccines are unsafe. They aren't effective in stopping it. We have mild variants right now, and we've got other medications to treat it. I see no justification ethically, morally, scientifically for continuing it. Pull them off. Do the studies that should have been done before. And there may be a time in the future when we can relaunch them, perhaps with some changes, but not right now.
Yeah. I'm going to say my position is, and I think Steve Kirsch and Malhotra is going to agree with you. My position is we accomplished a lot with them at great risk and with moderate amounts of harm, it appears, but we accomplished quite a bit. But to forge on with the kind of intensity and certitude just seems nonsensical to me. To go, you got to do it. It does not seem right to me. People want it; they should be able to get it. But this, it's not a mandate, but this near mandating and sort of, it's just, I don't know. Right. It doesn't seem wise to me. Okay, well there we go, Dr. Kelly Victory. We will see you in here tomorrow at 3:00. Yes,
we'll be back tomorrow. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for your service, Kelly.
As I say, if this continues much longer, I'm going to need more than Genucel. I'm going to need vodka. This is insanity.
Well, tomorrow's my birthday. So.
Tomorrow's your birthday. All right. Well,
Susan, get on that.
Okay.
Okay, see you.
All right. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help. You make me think about when I was a kid, I've never ever talked about this. I had this fantasy that I wanted to, whenever we traveled as a family, like I was like 3 or 4 years old, I wanted to be able to zap my house and backyard to wherever I was traveling.
Wow, cool.
And I realized as an adult, I recreated that a little bit by, we keep an apartment here and there. Those are my homes.
Okay, so let's talk about this idea 5-year-old Drew had, because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And that actually, that's enlightenment. Like what you're talking about there is actually, like if you take it one step deeper, what you want is the feeling of being home.
Yes, correct.
But you want that wherever you go.
Correct. And I didn't know that. Now I know that.
Yeah, that's what what
I wanted.
Looking for.
I kind of wanted my backyard with me wherever I go, but as an adult, I didn't. I just wanted the home.
That's it. Home. That thing you're talking about, this is I've been kicking this idea around a lot lately because I get into this Buddhist shit. I'm always reading it. And like the way this one teacher puts it, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, is, okay, you come home at the end of the day, you've worked your ass off, you sit down on the couch, and you go, that.
Yeah.
What if you could expand that?
Yeah. Wherever you go.
Everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.